Hello and welcome to this special live on the print. I'm Snehesh Alex Philip. Now, as I speak right now, Bangladeshi Prime Minister, who was forced to resign earlier today, has landed at the Air Force Base in Hindon. Now, her final destination, what I'm told, is London, but one will have to really wait and watch. But these developments have, but the fact is that she's resigned and she's out of Bangladesh. What does it really mean for India? What does it mean for the region? And what does it mean for Bangladesh as such? And to answer these questions, I have with me our contributing editor, who is Deep Halder, who is a journalist and an author, and he's someone who has extensively traveled in Bangladesh, right? And he's someone that we would turn to whenever we would want to understand about what's happening in Bangladesh. Uh, my Also at the same time, do send in your questions. I have my team who will keep sending me questions on my phone, and I'll read out those and I'll ask those questions to Deep. So Deep, now that she's landed here in Hindon, what does it mean for India, as in her resignation and whatever that has happened in Bangladesh?
I think, in short, what it means for India is visible on our TV screens. There's total anarchy in Bangladesh as we speak. Protesters have stormed into Ganabhavan, which was our official residence. There's loot, and there is there are some uh, amusing visuals of some people having chicken biryani. Now, all this would have been funny if not for the fact that India really doesn't know what next as far as Bangladesh is concerned, because I think a lot of commentators had over the course of the past few years had suggested that India should have more options than Sheikh Hasina in Bangladesh. But the fact is that Sheikh Hasina and under Sheikh Hasina and under Prime Minister Modi, India Bangladesh's strategic partnership had been taken to a different level. It's not just in infrastructure projects in power and energy sectors, but you could sense the camaraderie between the two leaders every time they happened to meet, whether it was in the G20 summit or in 2021, for instance, when Prime Minister Modi went to Bangladesh on the country's 50th Independence Day. There were protests inside Bangladesh over Modi's visit, and there were hardline Islamist groups who had come on the streets to protest Modi's visit, and calling Modi a Hindutva leader, and all of those things. And Hasina had dealt with them had dealt with them by almost ordering her police to shoot them down. Because she did not want anything to go wrong with Prime Minister Modi's visit. So she was that good a friend of India. If you had in 2021, for instance, when there was anti Hindu violence in Bangladesh over a piece of fake news, this was during the Durga Puja in 2021. Delhi was very measured in what it said. You know, Likewise, Bangladesh was very measured in what it said when there was a contentious issue like abrogation of Article 370. So, I mean, Hasina was India's friend in Bangladesh, and that in the end became her undoing. So now that India has literally had rather kept all its eggs in one basket, and with this protests, which were what, a month long, suddenly resulting in her fleeing the country, resigning and fleeing the country, I don't know what India's options really are. So it's right now, I think, it's really bad news for India. There's no other way of putting it.
So, while it is bad news for India, there is no doubt about it. Can India salvage the situation? But because you mentioned the fact that India has put all its eggs in one basket. So,
Right.
didn't India reach out to the opposition parties, BNP, if not the Jamaat for that matter?
Look, there are unconfirmed reports that there have been some talks outside Bangladesh between certain sections of the Indian establishment and the BNP. I have, in fact, in my reports for the print, also I have done an interview with a gentleman who's pretty high up in the ranks of the BNP, Nitai Roy Chaudhary, who had told me that BNP would want to talk to India more. and he said so in a print interview. And he said that, sort of, and his daughter Nipun Roy Chaudhary, who was picked up, who's a popular BNP leader in Dhaka, and who had been picked up by Hasina's police during the current protests. She had done another interview with me where she said that, it's not as if we should let bygones be bygones, and this entire image of BNP as being anti-Hindu and anti-India is a construct that Sheikh Hasina had herself put out. So India should be talking to us. But I think those talks had not really gone far, because I think India could not imagine a situation that took place over the course of the past few days. I mean, imagine it was a quota reforms move, students protest, and it led to the fleeing of a sitting prime minister from a country. I mean, such protests, the quota protests, we have quota protests in India, right? I mean, across states, we have had such protests. But imagine the prime minister of a country had to flee, and somebody who had, one would think, total grip over her country, over her people, the army, the paramilitary, the police. She had to flee in this way over a quota protest, over what began as a quota protest. So I think India did not think such a thing could happen, at least not so soon.
Well, thank you so much for these insights. So, instead of me asking the questions, I'm going to take viewers' questions. So this is some I tweeted on I had tweeted asking for questions, and one user Nick has asked, "Is US behind this or China?" Behind this, of course, means what has happened in Bangladesh.
Well, I mean, sitting in Delhi, I have, of course, traveled extensively in Bangladesh in the last couple of years. But it just guesswork, I would say. But I think Hasina herself had answered this question some time ago, where she mentioned the role of a white Christian country, who is trying to play spoil sport in this region, queer the pitch, if I may put it that way, in this region. And she had said that that particular white Christian country is trying to carve out an independent country out of some parts of India, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. Now that was a very serious allegation from the head of a state, former head of a state now. But I think enough and more has been spoken in the past couple of weeks, even before, about the way uh, American diplomats pressurized Bangladesh in the run-up to the January 7 elections. How they not only spoke to opposition parties, mainly the BNP, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, but also to Jamaat. There were reports in certain sections of Bangladesh press that some US officials had met Jamaat members. Why would the US meet Jamaat? I mean, Jamaat had been against the very formation of Bangladesh,
Yeah,
right?
it sided
Jamaat,
with Pakistan.
yes, it's pro-Pakistan. It is anti-Hindu. It wants Shari. Its stated aim, even before the election. I mean, Jamaat could not participate, Snehesh, in the January 7 polls, because the Supreme Court, Bangladesh Supreme Court, barred it from participating in the polls. But they openly said that if they were in power, they would enforce Sharia law in Bangladesh. They said that enough of man-made laws in Bangladesh. We want Sharia law. So why would a US diplomat want to speak to Jamaat? So yes, today, after Hasina had to leave her country the way she did, I mean, it is perhaps time to ask very serious questions of the US, that why did American diplomats consistently speak to powers inimical, not just to Hasina. That is well and fine. You can speak to people who are in the country, in a particular country's opposition space, but people who are, why did you speak to people who are against the very idea of that country?
True. I have one more question coming in from a reader or viewer on YouTube, and he or she is asking, how likely is it that the Bangladesh army will try to hold on to power and install a puppet government? Because the army chief did a press conference where he said that there would be an interim government. But do you think, given how military really functions, do you think that the military would actually want to have set up a puppet government?
So this military had been, at least the military top brasses had been chosen by Hasina herself. So they were loyal to Hasina till the very end, right?
Oh, okay.
Yes. So, I mean, today, whatever the army chief said, I mean, if you see the nature of the protests in Dhaka and the global headlines, it was a completely untenable situation. There had to be, I think, had it been a military setup that was not friendly towards Hasina would not have been given the space to escape. Do not forget that her father was executed by his own military,
Exactly.
right? So this is a military establishment. In fact, I can tell you that senior journalists in Dhaka had told me that Hasina was very careful in choosing anybody above major general and above, you know. So from major general, lieutenant general to generals, she was very cautious about who comes into the top ranks of the army. So it is background checks were done so that there's no infiltration of BNP or Jamaat into the army's ranks at that level. So for the army now to sort of have a puppet government in place, uh, I don't know. We'd have to wait and see. What is more likely, perhaps, if we are talking about America and CIA's role in Bangladesh, I think there would be some interference there in terms of who the next acting prime minister would be. What is the nature of the cabinet that in the interim government? Who would be members of that cabinet? I think it is more than the military. It is outside forces at play, which would perhaps have a say in this, at least for now, till the country goes to polls again.
Well, that's a good point. The fact is that the army, as you rightly pointed out, was loyal to Sheikh Hasina, and that is the reason why Sheikh Hasina was able to get out, because she
Right.
first got out of her residence via helicopter, and then she's now landed in Hindon on a Bangladeshi transport aircraft, the C-130. Now that you're talking about India, I have a YouTube viewer who's asking, was India caught sleeping? Didn't India anticipate such a situation?
I would like to believe that India was concerned after January 7, especially looking at the global headlines about Hasina and also the Boycott India movement, which started soon after Hasina came back to power for historic fourth term in office. That this cannot go on forever. Hasina is also 76, and there was time for to look at a successor. There was a lot of talk about who's going to succeed, whether it's a son or her daughter, who incidentally is in Delhi.
Yeah.
But so who would, or is it her sister Sheikh Rehana who also escaped with her today from Gonabhavan? But I think India thought that this is a decision that can be taken not in the long term but the short term. But I think India did not quite know that the short term would be such a short term, as in January 7, and this is August. So literally in a couple of months, such a situation will take place. I'm not very sure whether India was aware of this, that it would
So
happen
you're
so
saying
soon.
India didn't read the situation very well. And
Very
that is
well,
what,
yeah.
yeah, and I have another question coming in from Arjit Sukul. And he's asking, why did India not try to intervene in some way and mitigate this?
But I mean, Snehesh, you'd be able to tell us better. But I think my sources say that at least sections of the Indian military establishment were in talks with the higher ups in Bangladesh during when the protests turned so violent and during the digital darkness, 11 days of digital darkness that Bangladesh went through. But what else could India have done? I mean, it's a sovereign country. I mean, it's a popular notion in Bangladesh that India controls Bangladesh, but it's not so. I mean, it is one thing to have a prime minister of another country who wants to keep friendly ties with you. It is quite another to manage the affairs of the country. So, what could India have done? I mean, Hasina could not manage the situation with her entire police personnel. She even got the military out. I mean, they could
Yeah.
not contain the situation. What could India have done?
I think the classic, I've had these similar questions on Twitter also. I think what people are really thinking is whether India could have been involved militarily. But as Deep said, that Bangladesh is a sovereign country. You cannot be militarily involved in something which is happening internally within that country itself, right?
Yes.
I can understand if Bangladesh is under attack by a third country and then India coming to Bangladesh's defense. That's something which is there. But to intervene militarily would be something that no country would do, and no country would tolerate it. And India, as Deep mentioned, while there is whole speculation about India having running Bangladesh, the fact is that India and Bangladesh have had its differences too. And my next question to Deep would exactly be that, Deep, was it true that India really did have a lot of say in Bangladesh, or was Sheikh Hasina dealing with India, dealing with Prime Minister Modi because she had to deal with it, to deal with him and the India as such, and she was also dealing with China. It was not that she had bad
Yes,
relations with
I
China.
mean, and I would say that she balanced quite well between India and China. I think it's a bit of a stretch to say India managed Bangladesh's affairs. India, I think the very birth of Bangladesh, today's Bangladeshi youth would want to read history very differently, because I have also written about that. The way they look at 1971 War of Independence and India's role is very different from what the previous generation looked at 1971, right? And but I think India has always tried, mostly through its independent history, tried to be friendly with Bangladesh. Under Sheikh Hasina and under Prime Minister Modi currently, there has been, in the last 10 years, there has the friendship has had really blossomed. But that apart, I mean, apart from strategic partnership, and apart from, like I said, during certain crucial moments in the in these two countries, politics, whether it's in Kashmir, abrogation of Article 370, or during the 2021 anti-Hindu Durga Puja riots, they have maintained strategic silence, right? Vis-a-vis, if you look at the chatter coming out of, say, Pakistan, they have maintained strategic silence. But beyond that, I don't think India has. I mean, it's a bit of a stretch to say that India used to manage, rather, Bangladesh's affairs. India had a friendly government under Hasina's prime ministership, and it made the most of it, like anybody would. So did Hasina, for instance. I mean, she got
Absolutely.
India to help to sort of to be with Bangladesh, and she faced terrorism in her own country. There are hardline Islamist groups, and India shares a huge border with Bangladesh. So I mean, there is also, uh, if you remember, which year was it? 2022 December. The Bangladesh Home Minister Asaduzzaman Khan was in Delhi to meet Home
Yeah.
Minister Amit Shah, and they discussed borders. They also discussed terror activities within Bangladesh which could affect India. So those were very important spaces where these two countries had to, and the two prime ministers had to operate and cooperate.
That's true. And I have a question coming in from Syed Sarfaz Ali. What's next for Hasina now? What happened now to her? Well, I'll answer the latter. The fact is that she's landed in Hindon. She is doing a technical stopover in India. And her eventual destination, what I'm told, is London. So I'm not whether sure whether she'll fly now directly to London, or is she going to do a small halt in India, maybe for tonight or maybe for 1 or 2 days. But her eventual destination, she's going to London. Now, if you could, Deep, if you could answer the other question, which was what's next for Hasina now?
Very difficult to say. Look, Hasina, as good as Hasina was for India, Hasina had become hugely unpopular within Bangladesh. The last election and the election before that, especially the last election, because I happened to be in Bangladesh when it took place, it was not much of an election. The principal opposition party, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, did not participate in the polls, saying that it's a sham election.
Yeah.
The largest Islamist party, the Jamaat Islam Bangladesh, however it's a political party. It was barred by the Supreme Court of the country from participating in elections. There were lots of independent candidates. Many of them, it was later found out, owe their allegiance to Sheikh Hasina's Army League. So it was a bit of a sham of an election. So she was getting hugely unpopular within Bangladesh. So right now, whatever will happen in Bangladesh politically, I do not see right now Hasina or her party's role in that. In fact, as we are speaking, Snehesh, I was getting I was getting sort of reports from my sources in Dhaka that it's anarchy in Dhaka streets right now. Okay, people are stopping cars and asking drivers to show their licenses and asking them to open the hoods to see if there is any trace of Army League or affiliation to Army League, whether in a visiting card or an ID card, or in the Army League's flag, which has been kept behind. If they can find any association with Army League, so it's that unpopular. People who are affiliated. The Saturday's yesterday's violence was extreme. Was targeted specifically at Army League local workers, leaders, right? So it is, the party as a whole is very unpopular right now in Bangladesh. So for Hasina to immediately have a say or have any part to play in Bangladesh's politics is very unlikely.
And this viewer who's asking a question, what happens now vis-a-vis India's position with Bangladesh? And that's something even I would love to know. What happens to India's position? How will India react now?
India will have to work with the interim government that comes to power, but I think India should, and this is something India should have done. I don't know if at least my information doesn't say so, but India should be talking to all the stakeholders in the political arena in Bangladesh. The Bangladesh Nationalist Party, perhaps most importantly, because it's a big party. It has been in power in Bangladesh. Uh, it was a viable political space in Bangladesh till Khalida Zia was put under house arrest, and her son Tariq Rahman Zia had to seek exile, had to go in exile in London. But India should be talking to the other political players in Bangladesh, and not just to the interim government, whoever becomes the prime minister of Bangladesh now, and the cabinet, because that's a short term thing. There will be elections eventually. And like I said, I don't think Army League is going to make a comeback anytime soon, at least not very soon.
That's true. That is true. So I have a question coming in, which what happens to Bangladesh economy? Will it impact, especially when the country is facing challenges? Because remember, Deep, that Bangladesh the economy had really
Boom
boomed, right?
was had made
And
headlines. Yeah.
it was performing better than that of India in multiple areas. So what happens to Bangladesh economy now? Is there a fear that it would crash?
There is a huge fear. There's anarchy on the streets, Snehesh. And in a lighter vein, I'm saying that industrialists generally like autocrats, and because they know. So I mean, traditionally from Henry Ford onwards, people you'd see that people had top big industrialists like concentration of power, because you know what you're dealing with. You do not want unstable political situations in the country where you're operating in. So with this kind of political instability, I do not think Bangladesh's economy is something that will thrive immediately.
Have a question on Twitter saying, just wanted to ask, how with such vast majority in a country, people mistrust same government within a span of few months of election? So are we to assume that the elections were actually not really democratic per se, or the high voting percentage and support for the government was something which was not real?
So yeah, you'd be absolutely right in saying that, because I think the official figure, official voting percentage during the January 7th polls was 40%. I was on the ground. It was nowhere close. So officially, it was reported to be 40%. There the some colleagues, journalist colleagues, were flown in from various Indian cities to Dhaka. They were kept in plush hotels, and they were taken to, how it happens. They were taken to a
Right.
few polling booths within Dhaka, which were well managed and where there was a long queue. And they reported that everything is fine in Bangladesh. But I happened to go beyond Dhaka, and I've been traveling in Dhaka before the election, so I know it was a sham. The voting percentage was nowhere near 40. Like I said, there are a lot of independents who later you got to know, there was a symbol, the symbol of the eagle, funnily, which a lot of independent candidates sort of sported during. I tell you a very interesting story. So one very popular, and he happens to be a Hindu, very popular Hindu MP, sitting MP, was not given a ticket by Awami League. Okay,
Okay.
so he fought as an independent candidate against the Awami League candidate. Right, he won the election and then came back to Awami League. So it was, can you believe it? It was that much of a farce. So yeah, she did not, and it did not. January 7 election, January 7 is also the result day. Same day the results came out, she won by a landslide.
Yeah.
But the point is, she has been unpopular for a very long time. At least the last 5 years of her reign, and I have written about this extensively. There were charges of large scale corruption, syndicate Raj, police brutality. Amnesty International, others, and have rightly so pointed those out. The Rapid Action Battalion, which is a paramilitary force, you know about it. They have been accused of disappearances, tortures, all of these things. Her political opponents were kept in jail before elections, even after elections. So she had lost. She was very unpopular in Bangladesh. She had a tight grip over the country, though. She had the military in her control. She had the police in her control. The industrialists in her control. So she had a grip on the narrative till she lost it.
It's interesting that you said this. And viewers, this is the reason why you should continue to read the print and subscribe to the print. And as Deep said, while many other journalists parachuted into Bangladesh, they went to specific polling booths. Deep traveled outside Dhaka city, went beyond where the government was taking, and was able to call out the sham elections that it was. And this brings me to one question for myself, Deep, to you is, so if the elections were sham and she ruled with such an iron fist, there are many people who call her a dictator actually, and not really a
Right.
democratically elected prime minister. So was she a dictator or was she elected prime minister?
Well, there was an election, and there was an election commissioner. There were polling booths, the polling stations that were set, that were there. People went, whatever the voting percentage was.
Right. Huh.
But I won't, you call a leader dictator just like that these days on Twitter and on social media. She was definitely authoritarian. It can be argued that to run a country like Bangladesh, which has had such a bloody birth, and where hardline Islamic militancy is still such a big problem. You needed somebody who would rule the country with an iron fist. But having said that, the parameters are very different. It's very fine to be sitting in Delhi or in London, or in a foreign country, and say, oh, the elections were a sham and this and that. But for Hasina to, I'll tell you this, because of her close, there is nothing in because her party Army League's stated position was a secular Bangladesh. Okay, the party's slogan was and is dharmo jar jar utsav shobar, as in, you can the religion, your religion is personal to you, but the
Okay.
festivity is there for everybody, right? So be it Saraswati Puja or Durga Puja or Eid, there was a sense that she and her party tried to bring in Bangladesh, that there's a country for everybody, right? Now that earned her the moniker of being a Hindu. If you hear some of the slogans on Dhaka streets, and not just now, even before the elections, if you see some of the cartoons, Hasina cartoons that are being put out, she is being likened to Goddess Kali. Okay, and so to run a country which is literally sitting on a park egg, you had to have somebody who was very, I don't know how to say this, but who had a grip on the situation. So to say that she was a dictator or she was an autocrat, or I know that she, but yes, I mean, it's also true that she had, however the elections were conducted, I felt this especially since the middle of last year to now, that she was losing her grip on the narrative. just by showcasing infrastructure projects, the Shopner Podda Setu, which is a wonderful infrastructure project over the Padma River, uh, this multi-lane bridge is, and being secular and making your economy prosper are not enough. You needed to have somewhere the people's trust which he was losing,
and which the Jamatis were winning. So, and
which the
that too,
Jamatis were winning.
yeah, and that's, and Deep, you mentioned that this was she was she believed in secular Bangladesh,
Yeah,
and now the Jamatis are in back, the Islamists are back in action, are in
yeah.
power, and so hence, Navjot Singh Gill asked me on Twitter, what about Hindu safety in Bangladesh now? Is that a concern, Deep?
That's a huge concern. That is a huge concern. See, there are ways and ways of looking at this. You can say that the people of Bangladesh have risen to topple a dictator, and you can say that that's a headline. You can say that that somebody uh, who had who had held on to power for 20 long years through, at least this time through a sham election, needed to be replaced. You can say all of these things, and these are big stories.
Yeah,
But what perhaps will go unnoticed in India and even outside is the fact that the Bangladeshi Hindu happens to be, uh, there's no one literally right now to speak up for the Bangladeshi Hindu. There are, I have had distress calls since the past couple of days of my sources on the ground, and also Hindus. I've done a book on this, being Hindu in Bangladesh, which came out last year. So this is a subject that I know to some extent. So I know how vulnerable they are. Attacks, large scale attacks in 2021 took place even when Hasina was in power,
exactly.
right? And now that she's not in power, I was just reading it out to a colleague, messages from various WhatsApp groups which have been forwarded to me, which say that now that Hasina is gone, we must teach these Hindus a lesson. So there is, I mean, I don't know how many headlines these will make as the events unfold over the next couple of days, but I think right now, literally, I see there's no one to speak up for the Bangladeshi Hindu.
Well, Deep, that's a very sad development. I don't know, how much other media would cover. We look at this, but viewers, we have Deep, someone who focuses a lot on Bangladesh, and I'm sure that at the print you would find Deep and my other colleagues covering Bangladesh more closely, and anything to do with Bangladesh. If there are atrocities against Hindus that would happen in Bangladesh, as Deep fears, the print would be there to cover it. But thank you so much, Deep, and all our
Thank
viewers
you,
for
Snehesh.
joining into this YouTube live. Please do subscribe to the Print's YouTube channel for more such videos. Thank you.
Thank you.